In this video, I'm going to address both the required books for this class and the optional commentaries for this class. I'll make some comments on those required books, why they are chosen, and then the purpose of commenting on the optional commentaries is so that you can best choose a commentary that you purchase or acquire for this class, and that you will serve as the representative for that commentary for the duration of the so, with respect to the required books for the class, and these first four are all shared between you all as Greek exegesis students and the English exegesis students. The first one is Elements of Biblical Exegesis by Michael J. Gorman. The third edition, there are significant updates to the third edition, so I do ask you to this third edition, even if the other previous edition. This book will serve as sort of our guide for learning how to do the process of regular readings from that textbook throughout, and sort of will use some of the principles, concepts, and ideas from that book and apply them to Paul's letter to the Romans to sort of get practice with those exegetical skill sets that Dr. Gorman introduced. The second one is Elsa Temez's The Amnesty of Grace, translated by Sharon Ringy. This is the subtitle here is Justification by Faith from a Latin American Perspective. As you will see with our commentaries and even with our required texts, Romans in particular is a book of the Bible, the scholarship on which is largely dominated by white voices, and particularly white male voices. What Dr. Tamez does is brings a very different perspective to the idea of justification by faith. He's going to argue that sort of thinking about justification in individualized terms and in sort of a Western way is to misunderstand the nature of what Paul is talking about with respect to justification. So this book is not particularly about Romans. It is particularly about Paul, and there is a chapter devoted to Romans in particular. But this book is going to serve as sort of a foundation that we lay at the beginning of the class to rethink how we consider some central Pauline concepts. So we'll be reading Dr. Tamez's book in the first 4 or 5 weeks of class before we jump headlong into Paul's letter to the the third one is a book by Daniel Kirk, Dr. Daniel Kirk, called Romans for Normal People. This is a fantastic book, not only for our purposes of the class, but this is a kind of resource that you might utilize for a church study on Romans. And this is a series, the Bible for Normal People, and all of the books in this series are meant to sort of be accessible. They don't require that you have a seminary education to engage them, though they do engage the topic sort of at depth. So all the books are all written by foremost biblical scholars in the field. This one in particular by Daniel Kirk is incredibly engaging to read. I laughed many times while reading it, so it's funny. And it'll serve as sort of our baseline shared content throughout the period of the course. So both English exegesis as well as Greek exegesis. We'll be reading a chapter from that each week once we start into Romans, and that'll be sort of the place where we have the same shared material. And what it really does is it gets us a grounding for what's going on in the particular passage or the particular chapters in Romans that are going to be engaging for. And so now we move to commentaries. We have one shared commentary that is required that all students, both you all Greek exegesis students and English exegesis students require. This is Frank J. Matera's Romans commentary in the Paideia series. This series is a particularly sort of well-balanced series, both theologically and ideologically. It doesn't tend to be too conservative or too progressive. It also is well-balanced as with respect to sort of what kind of knowledge it assumes. It does assume that you have some understanding of biblical studies and of the New Testament, sort of in the way that we have studied the New Testament in the Introduction to the New Testament class and in exegesis classes at UD. But it doesn't assume a deep level of Greek. It will mention Greek concepts, Greek words, but it is not too focused on the Greek and on grammar. So it works for both English exegesis students and Greek exegesis students. In my opinion, this commentary and this commentary series in particular is a really good baseline starting point when you see what the most basic information about a passage might be. So this is one of the first commentaries that I go to when doing personal study text, and that is the case for whatever biblical text it is, or for whatever New Testament it is. The Paideia series. This is the shared commentary series that we use for any exegesis. Other books of the Bible, I choose this commentary series as well as one of the required texts for the class. All right, now so we're moving over to optional commentaries. So if you look at the syllabus, I'm going to go in the order that these commentaries are listed on the syllabus. And as a reminder, you are responsible for having at least one of these commentaries, having access to one of these commentaries. I would encourage you to purchase more than one, to acquire more than one. I think having multiple commentaries is very useful, not only for the purposes of the class, but beyond the purposes of the class. But what will happen is sort of once we get into Romans, which will happen in about week 4 of the class, you will start to be the representative for your commentary. And there might be other people that are also representatives of the same commentary, but you will read the content from that commentary. And oftentimes I will ask you to bring into the conversation what your particular commentary says about certain exegetical issues, grammatical issues, etc. So what I'm going to do is run through these different commentaries, give you some comments on them, show you how large they are, so you can sort of know what you are or are not committing to. And the purpose, again, is so that you can make a more informed decision about which commentary to acquire for the purposes of the class. So the first one is by the late James Dunn, who recently passed away. It's in 2 volumes. It's the Word Biblical Commentary series. And this is sort of, as far as Romans commentaries goes, this would be sort of in the top 5 as far as scholarly commentaries go. A very, very important scholarly commentary. James Dunn, if you remember back to the New Testament class, is one of the sort of movers and shakers with respect to the new perspective on Paul. So a representative, the new perspective on Paul. This commentary series, the Word Commentary series, does engage the Greek in a very nitty-gritty kind of way. It engages textual issues really well, that is to say, sort of manuscript issues. It engages grammatical issues, does a really good job with history, and it also does some with application. Not all commentaries do a lot with application necessarily, especially the more sort of scholarly they tend to be, but this one does a whole lot. Not a whole lot, does some with application as well. So it is not only highly scholarly, but it also is sort of applicable in sort of a ministry context. So it strikes a nice balance that way. This one, the largest of all the commentaries on the list, is in the Hermeneia commentary series. They always have red covers with gold lion on it. And this is Hermeneia is sort of one of the 2 most highfalutin or the most scholarly commentary series. The other is the Anchor Bible commentary series. We don't have a commentary for this particular option for particular. But it tends to be the sort of most historical, most sort of objective, in scare quotes, doesn't necessarily do much with sort of ministry application, but it is going to be thoroughly historical. It's going to deal with the Greek, and it's going to deal with sort of the nitty-gritty in a really, really thorough way. So if you're looking for something that is most expansive, that is the one to go. The next one here is Arland Hultgren's Paul's Letter to the Romans. It's at large. So as far as Romans commentaries go, it's actually one of the shorter ones as options on the Greek list. It's a good sort of moderate commentary. It does engage issues of the Greek. It doesn't necessarily go too far into the weeds on things. And as a book published by Erdman's, a commentary published by Erdman's, it tends to be, and Dr. Hultgren tends to be sort of fairly moderate with respect to his outlook. The next one is the New International Greek Testament Commentary by Dr. Bruce Longdecker, a bit bigger than Dr. Hultgren's commentary. As its name implies, it is in the New International Greek Testament Commentary, so it's going to be very good on that's the focus of the commentary. So more than many of the other commentaries even, going to sort of focus on explaining issues of the Greek syntax and grammar. So if you sort of style yourself an aspiring Greek grammar nerd, this might be the one. Oh, and Bruce Longenecker is also fairly moderate, sort of in theologically. The next one is a New International Commentary on the New Testament by Douglas J. Moo, who is a professor at Wheaton College. Also very good on the Greek, really good on sort of historical issues, tends to be a touch more conservative than some of the other commentaries. Yeah, but really, really good on Greek, really good on history. A touch of application. Next one, Baker Exegetical Commentary on the New Testament, Dr. Schreiner, who teaches at Southern Baptist seminaries. Again, really, really good on Greek, a little bit on the history, not as much on the history as or Jewett's commentary, but sort of language focused, and also tends to have some sort of ministry. And the last one is the Zondervan Exegetical Commentary on the New Testament by Frank Thielman. This commentary series in particular, the sort of layout of it is one of my favorite layouts. The way that it produces the Greek of each verse with an English translation and comments on it. So you can sort of make a clear connection between what's going on that are being made because they are physically reproduced right next to each other. So the layout of this commentary is one of my favorites. As a commentary published by Zondervan, Zondervan tends to be a touch more conservative when it comes to theology. So this commentary is going to be a touch more conservative. So those are your commentary options, and what I want to leave you with is don't necessarily pick the commentary that you think that you will like because you completely align with the author's perspective. One of the things that past students have said and have valued the most is when they have chosen an optional commentary from a commentator that they might not necessarily think they are going to agree with, and title yourself a little bit more aggressive. You might choose a more sort of conservative comment. Think with how they are thinking. Stretch you in that. Opposite is true. You find yourself being conservative ideologically, theologically, maybe expanding your horizons by not choosing. So those are your options. As always, you can feel free to throw out any questions my way via email or in the week 1 questions. Sorry, questions.